the bag that we got. And when you get it in the mail, the first thing it's going to do is going to be flat, right, sitting down like this. And you want to get started right away. You want to start baking with this. This is the part that a lot of people want to maybe make a mistake. Just go ahead and shake it up a little bit, you know, before you use it, because what's happening, we have ingredients in there that we want you to make sure that they don't settle throughout the traveling process or as it comes. You know, so we want you to make sure that it is nicely mixed up before you use it. Another big tip is that when the bag has been opened, you want to really refrigerate the bag so it stays as fresh for at least a year, no problem. And make sure that you seal it up. The key about that is when you go over and pull it out, the refrigerator, the bag is now going to be cold and the ingredients are going to be cold. So thereby, when you are making a dough, it's going to take a little bit more time to ferment. And that's really what I wanted you to know. Just know when it's at room temperature or any kind of like the environment. If your room is warm, it starts to ferment faster. If the room is cold, it will slow down fermentation. So you may have to use a little bit of common sense as far as the volume goes. You know, when it's like typically 75% in volume, your loaf of bread, your pizza dough, whatever you're doing, then you're right on target. Again, after refrigeration, you know, you may use a little bit of warm water instead of cold water, but never hot water. Okay, so here's another great tip that you want to use or utilize when you're making bread. Fermentation is key. Slow fermentation brings great flavor. Like, for example, like a soup, when it's overnight, same with a dough. Okay, the faster you ferment a dough, it won't taste as good. It needs to develop flavor. So sometimes I hear from some of our customers, they say, well, you know, my dough kind of like over fermented, it collapsed on me. And do I need to throw it out? Under all circumstances, never take your dough and throw it out. So I want to show you really quickly on, you know, this is perfect, by the way. You can see the finger indent, like almost staying and comes back slowly. Or at this point, when it's like doubled in volume and it has flattened out, that's what we consider over fermenting. It is by all means not bad. It just means you can reintroduce it and refold it for a new loaf of bread. Okay? The last thing you want to do is to re-knead the dough. That's the worst thing you can do to it. So, you know, at this point, what you want to do is just kind of flatten it out and use it for your flatbread or for your pizza or focaccia, whatever you want to use it for. Okay, so here's tip number 4. When you get the mix and you're so excited to make bread, the one thing I need you to keep an eye on is actually the water temperature. Just use cold water temperature. Don't use hot, like don't boil it, because what it will do, it will only speed up your fermentation process and it will make your dough taste not funky at all, but it will just rise and faster, whereas slow fermentation is flavor. So just keep that in mind. No hot water. Okay, so here's tip number 5, really important. I get this question all the time. Wrapping your dough, getting it ready for the oven. Take a little plastic wrap or a Ziploc bag and just kind of cover it up to keep it nice and moist all the time. The best is to cover it up with like a saran wrap just before it goes into the oven, and you'll prevent any kind of like soggy crust on top. Okay, so this is another great trick that you want to do is for creating a crispy crust on the outside. So in order to do that, what we have to do is we got to create like a nice moist environment inside of our oven. And what we want to do with that is we want to take, this is like a little trick that my mother actually told me, is to take a little ice like this, right? And then have a hot sheet pan in the oven already. And just before you put it in, you take the ice and you put it on top. And you can see that nice sizzle right there. You close the oven for like 3 minutes or so. And then what you do is you place your bread inside. And now you have a nice moist environment in there, and thereby letting the bread grow to its maximum, creating a nice thin crispy crust on the outside. I hope you got that. Okay, so listen, we're going to talk about under fermenting. We talked about over fermenting, but under fermenting is another problem sometimes when you make bread. It's that you haven't given the bread enough rise. And that means you're looking for the bread or the bread dough, once you've mixed it, to increase at least double in volume. That's called proper fermenting. And also that's how you create a great flavor. If you do it right away after mixing, you're going to wind up with a bread that is like a cracker. And that's not what you want. You want to have a nice fluffy bread that has air holes inside, and that comes from a perfect fermentation. Again, double in size is key, and you're good to go. Alright, so here's another great tip that I want to talk to you about. So after like maybe 2-3 days and you left the dough in the refrigerator, you finally realize, oh my goodness, I left it in there and the dough is fermented, and you think, oh, now I have to throw it out. No way, you don't have to do any of that. All you need to do is just come up and be a little creative, go through your kitchen, grab some tomatoes, flatten out the dough like it would look like this, flatten out the dough, and place on some great like vegetables and a little bit of sauce, a little cheese. Any of that stuff goes well. Even I've had people come back to me and they said they just chopped in cinnamon and a little bit of butter and a little bit of sugar in there, and I kind of mixed it up, and then they put it into the form, and they called it a monkey bread. So all that fun stuff can be made even if you forget it, okay? Don't throw it out. Here's another one that you want to really keep handy, because this could really save you a lot of time and a lot of hassle. So freezing the dough. We're going to talk about like 1 minute about freezing the dough to preserve it. Like, so when you have a party next week and you want to just make a whole bunch of little pizzas, or you want to make some bread, what you can do is you can actually work ahead of time. And when you have your dough, right after mixing, and you place it into a Ziploc bag, you can simply put it into the freezer, and that will last, guess what, all the way up to like 2 weeks, no problem. When you bring it back out of the freezer, just simply take it from the freezer into the refrigerator overnight and let it sit, and it is ready to go the next day. And then you can go ahead and bake and enjoy your favorite items. Okay, so here's another tip regarding baking. So this dough that we have that's in the bag, that you have mixed, is a rather lean type of dough. That means it's not heavy, it's not rich, it's not a lot of fat, there's hardly any fat in there at all. And thereby what it needs a good temperature. 425 degrees is typically what you can bake this dough all the way through. Now, baking it is important that when you place a loaf of bread into your oven right here, and you pull it out, make sure that you kind of like tap the bottom of your bread to see that it sounds like a hollow, like a drum almost, and really create like some nice crust on there. I keep going back to crusted flavor. That's really something you want to focus on. A darker flavor creates more sweetness. However, don't burn it, okay? But 425 degrees should be ideal. Okay, so to make a successful pizza, what you really want to do is, or a loaf of bread. I mean, we have the dough in the refrigerator. It's been sitting there all night. And now what you want to do is you want to pull it out of the refrigerator. And when you see that the first dough that you're pulling out of the refrigerator, it's in your Ziploc bag. But you notice how tight this is, right? You can see how firm this dough. And compared to the dough that I've let sit here for 30 minutes. So I want to just show you the difference in this dough on how nice and relaxed this dough is. Okay? So what you want to do is you want to basically pull it out 30 minutes or so and let it sit on your counter before using it. This is ready to be made into a pizza. Okay, so we're about to finish up with one more very important trick. So your loaf of bread, we're almost ready and it's shaped. We're just going to taper this off a little bit at the end like this, as I showed you in the previous video. We're going to kind of taper it off so it looks like a real nice French baguette. And always put it on the seam. Take a little olive oil, put it on the pan, Gives it a little crispy crust on the bottom as well. Kind of use your hand like this and place the loaf of bread, put it on an angle so you can use the entire pan. Then take your saran wrap, cover it up, just like that. And now let it ferment until it's at least 3/4 in volume, like increased by 75%. So it should be about like this big when it's done. I wanted to show you when you're finished and pretend this is now at 75%, just take a little bit of olive oil in your hand like this and then kind of wipe it off. We're at home right here, so we love to do this by hand, old-fashioned style, and then nice and gently. You could also use water and then do the final cut before it goes into the oven. Okay? Always put a little water or olive oil on the outside. In some instances, you could also, when we do a sweet product, you could do like a cinnamon bun. An egg wash on top of it.